former quarterback Chase Daniel has shifted his thought process when it comes to if Sheddeur Sanders could be a starter for the Cleveland Browns. During the offseason, he was receiving a lot of backlash for his hate towards Sheddeur Sanders.
If you're there, you might be able to throw this there, but everything is covered. So what do you do when everything's covered? You buy some time, right? And just a missed throw right here. And look, I don't know if Jeudy stopped running right here. He's running pretty high, but anytime there's two guys in the same area, it's just not good. I thought Shedeur did a good job on this play, in particular, of buying some time. And when you buy some time, you allow stuff to get thrown down the middle of the football field. He's moving a little bit. He sees this. He's moving a little bit this way. I just want him to see him come back and go straight. That's all it is. You get your back out, right? That's a good pocket. 55 right here. Complete pancake. But that's it right there. That's where you want to hit. And man, if he hits that, I wonder how different this game is. Honestly, it's just throws it too far. I don't think, it's anyone's fault.
He fits his offense better because he's able to get out onto the move. We've seen what Deshaun Watson can do, right? When healthy, the last really great season he had was 2020. With Shedeur, though, you're building it from the ground.
Making excuses for Jerry Jeudy, as you guys can see, the honest truth is Jerry Jeudy did not stop running. Sheddeur Sanders just missed the throw. So much to improve upon, and you can tell why Jeudy was so frustrated by Shedeur on the sideline.
You have to go out there in the classroom, and you have to learn the offense from day one. There's no questions asked whatsoever. And Todd Monken has an offensive mind. He's really multiple in sets. He likes a lot of 3-4 wide receivers. He's really fast-paced. He knows how to create mismatches. And the cupboard's not bare there whatsoever. You have Fannin, Judkins, and Jerry Jeudy, especially if they go and add a Boston guy in the first round as well. Shedeur's going to have a chance, or whoever's going to be playing is going to have a chance to show what they have. And with a new head coach, with a quarterback-friendly offense, coming over from Lamar Jackson, I just think that Sheddeur Sanders, at this point in time, is probably giving him the best chance to win.
There's a moment in sports commentary that reveals everything about a person's character. It happens when the crowd turns, when the narrative flips, and suddenly you get to watch someone scramble to rewrite their entire position. That moment just arrived for Chase Daniel, and it is absolutely brutal to witness because everyone can see exactly what is happening. For years, and I mean years, Chase Daniel sat in front of cameras dissecting Sheddeur Sanders like he was trying to prove a point that nobody asked him to prove. He was meticulous about it. He would slow down the tape, frame by frame, and make sure every single incompletion, every missed throw, every moment of hesitation got highlighted and examined under a microscope. The message was clear. This kid doesn't belong. He's not ready. He's the problem. But then something shifted. The football world started paying attention to Shedeur in a different way. Performance started matching potential. Suddenly, the narratives that were so easy to control began slipping away. And Chase Daniel, watching the room change, watching the momentum reverse, made a decision. He would get in front of it. He would apologize. He would sound like he'd been rooting for Shedeur the entire time. The pivot was so smooth, so calculated, that it almost looked genuine. Except there's a problem with that approach. The tape doesn't lie, and neither does the timing. Stay locked in, because what we're about to break down reveals everything about how media narratives actually get constructed in professional football. Let's rewind to what actually happened during those years when Chase Daniel was positioning himself as the expert voice of doubt. This wasn't just casual analysis or passing commentary. This was a systematic effort to construct a narrative, and the precision with which he did it is actually impressive in the worst possible way. Chase Daniel wasn't just analyzing Shedeur's performance. He was prosecuting a case, and Shedeur was the defendant who had already been declared guilty before the trial even began. In one particular film breakdown session that became somewhat infamous, there's a play where Jerry Jeudy runs a route that isn't quite right. The path isn't sharp. The timing is off. The angle of his break is lazy. This is basic receiving work, the kind of thing that happens in football when a receiver isn't giving maximum effort or hasn't been drilling the exact depth and angle with his quarterback. But here's where Chase Daniel's analysis gets interesting. Instead of pointing out that Jeudy ran a poor route, instead of noting that this is a receiving problem, Chase Daniel somehow found a way to put the entire play on Shedeur. He talked about the throw being slightly overthrown. He noted that the ball was placed where only a receiver running the correct route could have tracked it. He made it sound like Shedeur had missed an easy throw. What he never said was that Jeudy deviated from the plan. What he never said was that this wasn't a quarterback problem, it was a receiving problem. What he never said was that Shedeur threw the ball where his receiver should have been, not where his receiver lazily went. That would have required giving Shedeur credit. That would have complicated the narrative Chase had already decided to tell. That same session, Chase described another broken play. Real pressure this time. The offensive line collapsed in seconds. Bodies in the pocket immediately. This was a legitimate protection breakdown, the kind of thing that happens in football when an offensive line fails to do its job. And when Shedeur felt the pressure coming, when he moved in the pocket like any smart quarterback would, when he did exactly what you're supposed to do in a collapsing situation, Chase Daniel actually nodded along. He gave credit. Good job buying time, essentially. Smart movement in the pocket. The analysis was sound. The quarterback had done his job in an impossible situation. But then Shedeur's next throw was incomplete. The pressure had disrupted the play. The timing was off. The window was gone. And suddenly, that same movement, that same intelligence, that same survival instinct became a negative. Suddenly, the mobility that Chase had praised became recklessness. Suddenly, the broken play was evidence of poor decision-making rather than poor protection. Suddenly, Chase shifted the blame from the offensive line to the quarterback, even though the quarterback had done exactly what he was supposed to do given the circumstances. This is what selective analysis looks like when it's executed by someone who actually knows football. This is what happens when someone sits down with a conclusion already in their pocket. This kid isn't going to make it, and then spends hours with film, pausing, rewinding, finding evidence to support it. Chase Daniel was not breaking down tape objectively. He wasn't following the evidence where it led. He was starting with a predetermined destination and cherry-picking the stops along the way that would get him there. Here's what makes this even more egregious. The pattern continued across multiple sessions. Every incompletion was highlighted. Every missed progression was examined. Every moment where Shedeur's timing was slightly off with a receiver got slow-motioned and analyzed to death. But when receivers ran wrong routes, when they broke their depth early, when they didn't run the pattern exactly as designed, those plays got glossed over. Well, he should have anticipated that, Chase would say, or he could have thrown it better. Always some way to make it Shedeur's fault, even when the footage clearly showed that someone else had broken down the play. This is the trap that a lot of analysis falls into, especially in football, where the game is so complex and so dependent on multiple moving parts that you can make a case for almost any conclusion if you're willing to be selective about which plays you highlight. If you want to prove someone is talented, you show the throws where the decision-making was perfect, where the geometry was exact, where the quarterback did everything right despite difficult circumstances. If you want to prove someone isn't ready, you show the throws where it was off by an inch, where the timing was slightly disrupted, where the outcome wasn't perfect, regardless of the context. Chase Daniel knew this. He has the expertise to know better. He has the football intelligence to understand that this kind of selective analysis is exactly that, selective. He wasn't stumbling through the tape hoping to learn something. He was walking through it with a flashlight looking for specific things. Missed throws, broken plays, moments of hesitation. And because football has enough complexity that you can find evidence of imperfection in any player's game if you look hard enough, he found plenty. The real crime here isn't that Chase Daniel made mistakes in his analysis. It's that he was consciously, deliberately, and systematically building a case against a young player when he should have been trying to understand what that young player was actually doing well. The intention matters. The effort to construct a narrative matters. And the refusal to apply the same standard of criticism to everyone around him matters most of all. But here's what absolutely destroys any credibility Chase Daniel had as an objective analyst. Here's what proves beyond any doubt that this was never really about football analysis at all. In the exact same timeframe when Chase was meticulously dissecting every aspect of Sheddeur Sanders' game, when he was slowing down tape and pointing out incompletions and missed progressions, Deshaun Watson was in Cleveland doing something remarkably similar. He was also overthrowing receivers. He was also holding the ball too long. He was also making decisions that didn't look like those of a franchise quarterback. But where was Chase Daniel's analysis of that? Where was the meticulous film breakdown? Where was the slow-motion replay showing exactly where Watson went wrong? Where were the rhetorical questions pointing out the obvious problems with Watson's decision-making process? Where was the line-by-line examination of every incompletion, every sack, every moment where Watson stared down a receiver instead of moving through his progressions? Where was that same energy, that same intensity, that same commitment to breaking down the tape frame by frame? Silence. Absolute silence. That silence is the tell. That silence is the smoking gun. Because if this was really about analysis, if this was really about understanding quarterback play and evaluating what you see on tape, then Deshaun Watson's struggles should have received the same treatment as Sheddeur Sanders's. The same level of scrutiny, the same willingness to highlight every mistake, the same framework of criticism. But they didn't. They got completely different treatments. Watson got excuses. Watson got context. Watson got the benefit of the doubt that comes with being a veteran in a new system. The narrative around Watson was always about adjustment, about learning, about needing time to get comfortable with new receivers and new coaching. The assumption was charitable. He's a good quarterback in a bad situation, and we should be patient while he figures it out. The analysis started from a place of faith rather than doubt. Shedeur got the opposite. Shedeur got assumptions. Shedeur got judgment. Shedeur got treated like he'd already been declared not good enough before he'd even finished learning the offense. The narrative around Shedeur was always about limitations, about readiness, about whether he actually belonged in the NFL. The assumption was skeptical. He's a young player who hasn't proven he can play at this level, and we should be dubious until he demonstrates otherwise. The analysis started from a place of doubt rather than faith. The contrast is so stark, so obvious, so impossible to justify, that it destroys the entire premise of Chase Daniel being an objective analyst. You cannot apply one standard of criticism to one quarterback and a completely different standard to another quarterback and claim that you're doing fair analysis. That's not analysis. That's bias. That's agenda. That's choosing your conclusion and then finding evidence to support it. And it's particularly revealing when you understand the context of who these two players are. Deshaun Watson is an established veteran with a proven track record of success in the NFL. He's been drafted high. He's been paid enormous money. He's got the kind of pedigree that insulates him from the harshest criticism. When he struggles, people say, well, he's adjusting to a new system. When he makes mistakes, people say, he'll figure it out eventually. The narrative around him is built on the assumption that he's good, and the burden is on the situation around him to prove otherwise. Sheddeur Sanders is a young player trying to prove himself in the NFL. He's got the kind of pedigree that actually makes people want to criticize him harder, not softer. Because there's a narrative about him being a product of his father's legacy, about getting opportunities he wouldn't have otherwise earned, about potentially being entitled or overrated. The narrative around him is built on skepticism, and the burden is on him to prove otherwise. So when Chase Daniel applies harsh criticism to Shedeur while giving Watson grace and context, he's not being objective. He's reinforcing an existing bias. He's saying to the football world, see, my expertise confirms what you already think about this kid. He's not ready. The system around him isn't the problem. He is. That carries weight. That matters. That shapes how millions of people think about Sheddeur Sanders' career and potential. Meanwhile, by remaining silent on Watson's struggles, by not subjecting them to the same level of scrutiny, Chase Daniel is implicitly saying that those struggles don't matter, or that they're not Watson's fault, or that we should wait for better evidence before drawing conclusions. That's an entirely different framework, and the fact that it's being applied to the veteran, while a much harsher framework is being applied to the young player, reveals the bias in the analysis. This is what selective standards look like in action. This is what happens when an analyst with a platform decides to use that platform not to educate, but to construct a particular narrative. And this is what happens when nobody calls it out in the moment. The bias becomes accepted as analysis. The agenda becomes accepted as expertise, and the young player gets labeled as not ready while the veteran gets labeled as adjusting. The tape doesn't care about Chase Daniel's standards, but the players do. And so do the fans who are trying to understand what's actually happening on the field. And then something happened. The narrative started to shift. Sheddeur Sanders started to show flashes of genuine competence. The performances began trending upward. The moments of hesitation began giving way to moments of confidence. The incompletions started to look less like evidence of incompetence and more like the kind of incompletions that happen in football when plays break down or receivers don't execute. The football world, always attuned to momentum and performance, started to shift its attention in a different direction. The whispers about Sheddeur being the future of the franchise got louder. The questions about whether he belonged got quieter. The narrative that had been so easy to control 6 months ago, the one that said this kid isn't ready, suddenly became harder to sustain because the tape was working against it, because the performances were working against it, because the reality of what Shedeur was actually doing was becoming harder to dismiss. And Chase Daniel, watching this in real time, watching the room change around him, watching the momentum reverse, made a decision. He would not be left behind. He would not be the guy who stayed negative while the rest of the football world was recognizing Shedeur's talent. He would not be isolated on an island defending a position that the evidence was no longer supporting. He would get in front of it. He would pivot. He would apologize. The apology came on live television. It was direct. It was public. It was impossible to miss. Chase Daniel stood in front of a camera and essentially said that he had been wrong about Sheddeur Sanders. That he could see now how the young quarterback fits the offense, that the system makes sense for him, that the weapons are there, that the coaching is there, that Shedeur has a legitimate chance to succeed in Cleveland. All of this is true, of course. Every single word of it is accurate. But here's the thing that makes it so revealing. The apology wasn't framed as a reconsideration based on new information. It was framed as a discovery. Like Chase Daniel had been doing research and arrived at truths that weren't visible before. Like he was sharing insights that only became apparent through careful analysis. Like he was the one who had figured it out. Except that's not what happened. Nothing new appeared. The offensive system under Todd Monken has been in place the entire time. The weapons have been there the entire time. The coaching staff's capabilities have been known the entire time. The information that Chase Daniel was suddenly sharing, the stuff about quarterback-friendly systems and creating pre-snap mismatches and rewarding smart processors, that's been available to anyone willing to watch closely. The only thing that changed was the momentum. The only thing that shifted was the public perception. The only thing that became undeniable was Shedeur's actual performance. And Chase Daniel, understanding this shift, decided that it was time to shift with it. This is what calculated repositioning looks like. This is what it looks like when someone in media realizes that they've backed themselves into a corner, and the smart play is to get out before the corner becomes a trap. If Chase Daniel had waited another season or two, if Shedeur had established himself as a legitimate NFL starter, then Chase would have looked foolish defending a position that the entire league had moved past. His credibility would have been damaged. His analysis would have been called into question. His future commentary would have been tainted by the fact that he'd been so wrong about such a high-profile player. But if he got out early, if he apologized now while there was still plausible deniability about why he was changing his mind, if he framed it as a recent discovery rather than an admission that he'd been deliberately harsh from the beginning, then he could survive the narrative shift intact. He could potentially even position himself as someone who had the good sense to revise his analysis when the evidence demanded it. He could frame it as growth. The timing is what proves this was calculated rather than genuine. It's too perfect. It comes at the exact moment when staying negative would have been untenable. It arrives right when the football world's consensus was hardening around Shedeur's legitimacy. It happens at precisely the moment when the cost of remaining critical had become too high to justify. Ask yourself a simple question. If Sheddeur Sanders had continued to struggle, if his performances had remained uneven, if the question marks had persisted and the answers hadn't emerged, would Chase Daniel be on camera right now apologizing? Would he be talking about the system fitting? Would he be discussing Todd Monken's coaching and the weapons available and the quarterback-friendly offense? Or would he still be slowing down tape, pointing out every incompletion, building the case against Shedeur's readiness? The answer is obvious. The answer is uncomfortable. The answer is that the apology only existed because the situation changed. The praise only started flowing when staying negative became impossible to sustain. The validation only came once it became clear that Shedeur would be validated regardless. That's not growth. That's not humility. That's not even really an apology, if we're being honest about what apologies actually require. An apology requires acknowledging that you were wrong and that you should have known better. It requires understanding the impact of your actions on the person you wronged. It requires committing to doing better in the future. What Chase Daniel offered was none of those things. What he offered was a strategic repositioning disguised in the language of personal reflection. The football world didn't need his apology. Sheddeur Sanders certainly didn't need it. What Chase Daniel needed was to not be left behind by history. Here's what makes this whole situation even more infuriating. The information that Chase Daniel is now sharing, the analysis he's now offering, the insights he's now providing about the Browns' offensive system and how it fits Sheddeur Sanders, all of it was always available. None of it is new. None of it represents a discovery. It's just a restatement of what people who were actually watching closely, who were actually analyzing honestly, already understood months ago. Todd Monken runs a system that is explicitly designed to reward smart quarterbacks. This isn't a secret. This isn't something that becomes apparent only after extended study. This is the foundational principle of his offensive philosophy. He worked with Lamar Jackson, one of the most mobile and intelligent quarterbacks in professional football. He understands how to design systems that create problems for defenses before the snap even happens. He values quick decision-making, pre-snap reads, and the ability to move through progressions rapidly. The system is fast-paced, multiple. It creates mismatches before the snap by using formation flexibility and receiver motion. These are the kinds of things that simplify reads for a young quarterback. These are the things that take pressure off decision-making because the play is already working in your favor by the time you snap the ball. Any serious analyst who watched Monken's system from a distance could tell you this. Any coach in the league could tell you this. Any quarterback coach could tell you this. The weapons around Shedeur are legitimate. Jerry Jeudy is exactly the kind of high-volume receiver who can thrive in a fast-paced system where he's getting the ball quickly and in rhythm. He doesn't need to be a separator at the top of the route. He needs to be in space when the ball arrives, and fast-paced systems are built to accomplish exactly that. He's a genuine NFL receiver who can move, who can create separation, who can run routes with precision when the system is built correctly. Jeudy is talented. He's the kind of receiver who can create problems for defenses in space. He can move around the formation. He can line him up at receiver. He can line him up in the slot. He can move him around pre-snap. He forces defenses to account for where he is, and in doing so, he creates spacing issues that benefit other players. That's exactly what a fast-paced, multiple offense wants from a receiver. Fant is a tight end with genuine ability. He can catch the ball. He can move after the catch. He can create spacing issues for defenses. He's not a blocker in the traditional sense, but he's useful in the kind of space creation football that Monken runs. He's another weapon, another option, another consideration for a young quarterback learning the system. From a pure structural standpoint, this situation is actually quite favorable. The coaching is there. The system is there. The weapons are there. The foundation is there for something genuinely special to be built in Cleveland. That's a true statement. Chase Daniel is correct about that. But here's what he's not saying out loud. This was always true. This framework existed months ago. This context was always available. The weapons have been in Cleveland the entire time. Monken has been running this system from day one of his tenure. The information that would have allowed a fair analyst to say, look, Shedeur may struggle early, but this offense is built in a way that gives him a chance to succeed. That information has been available the entire time. Chase Daniel could have walked into a film breakdown session 6 months ago and said exactly what he's saying now. He could have acknowledged that while Shedeur is a young player with a lot to learn, the pieces around him are favorable. He could have noted that while the incompletions are real, the system is designed to minimize the kind of decision-making that produces incompletions. He could have offered context instead of condemnation. He could have been fair instead of selective. Instead, he walked in looking for reasons why Shedeur wasn't good enough, and when you're looking for something, you tend to find it. He found the missed throws. He found the broken plays. He found the moments of hesitation. And he highlighted those while ignoring the context that would have made those moments more understandable. What Chase Daniel is describing now, the system that rewards smart quarterbacks, the weapons that create spacing issues, the coaching staff that knows how to build an environment where young QBs can develop, this is the information that people who watched Shedeur closely already knew. This is the context that honest analysts had already considered. This is the framework that should have been applied from the beginning. The tape was always there. The analysis was always available. The evidence has always supported the fact that Sheddeur Sanders has legitimate tools, legitimate football intelligence, and a legitimate chance to develop in this specific offense. Chase Daniel is standing there now like he just discovered this. Like he conducted some deep research and arrived at a revelation that nobody else had considered. Like he's sharing an insight that only became apparent through careful study. But what he's really doing is rewording what he should have said months ago if he'd been honest about his analysis from the beginning. He's just the latest voice joining a conversation that informed observers have been having for a while. He's not leading, he's just catching up. And the fact that he's presenting it as discovery instead of admission proves that the pivot was always about survival, not about actual growth. What's particularly galling about this entire situation is that Chase Daniel had all the tools to be fair from the beginning. He has the expertise, he has the football intelligence, he has the understanding of quarterback play that would have allowed him to apply the same framework to every situation, to every player, to every set of circumstances. He knows how to break down film. He knows what to look for. He knows the difference between a quarterback error and a system issue and a receiving issue. The problem wasn't capability. The problem was choice. Chase Daniel chose to apply harsh standards to Shedeur while applying more generous standards to other players in similar situations. He chose to highlight Shedeur's mistakes while glossing over mistakes made by the people around him. He chose to build a case against Shedeur when he could have built understanding. And that choice reveals something important about how media narratives get constructed in professional football. When you have someone like Chase Daniel with a platform, with access to film, with the credibility that comes from having played the position at a high level, and that person decides to use their platform to construct a particular narrative rather than to analyze objectively, it shapes how millions of people think about players. It creates a gravitational pull toward doubt. It makes casual fans think, well, if this former QB thinks he's not ready, maybe he really isn't. It influences how coaches evaluate players. It affects how scouts approach their work. It shapes the entire conversation around a young player's potential. That power matters. That responsibility matters. And using it to prosecute someone rather than to educate people about what you're actually seeing is a serious betrayal of the trust that platform provides. Every analyst knows this. Every former player turned commentator understands that their words carry weight. They understand that their analysis influences perception. And if they're choosing to use that influence to build a case against someone rather than to fairly evaluate them, that's a deliberate choice with real consequences. The other element that cannot be ignored is the context of who Sheddeur Sanders is. His father is Sheddeur Sanders, one of the most famous athletes in sports history. His position in football comes with different gravitational forces than a player drafted in the third round from an unknown college program. There's already a lens of scrutiny pointed at him. There's already a narrative framework built in. Either he's going to be a success story that validates his father's legacy, or he's going to be a cautionary tale about nepotism and entitlement in professional sports. In that context, Chase Daniel's years of criticism weren't just analysis. They were reinforcing an existing narrative. They were adding weight to doubt that was already present. They were saying to the football world, see, I've watched the tape. This kid isn't ready. My expertise confirms your suspicions. When you're a young player trying to prove yourself under that kind of scrutiny, when you're carrying the weight of your father's legacy, when there's already a significant portion of people who doubt whether you earned your opportunity, that kind of negative commentary from an informed source matters. It affects the way coaches see you. It affects the way scouts evaluate you. It affects the way fans approach your development. And what's particularly cynical about Chase Daniel's flip is that he didn't acknowledge any of this. He didn't say, look, I was overly harsh on this kid, and in retrospect, I should have considered the context more carefully. He didn't say, I was applying unfair standards, and I want to correct the record. He just changed his opinion and moved forward like the previous years of criticism had never happened. Like the narrative he'd been building didn't carry any weight. Like his words hadn't influenced how people perceived Sheddeur Sanders. That kind of accountability, free reversal, is actually more damaging than the original criticism, because it proves that Chase Daniel never believed in objective analysis. It proves that he was willing to adjust his positions based on momentum rather than based on evidence. It proves that his analysis is flexible in whatever direction serves his interests. And it proves that for people who have that kind of flexibility, consistency and integrity aren't actually important. The most infuriating part is how clean the flip was, How smooth, how seamless. One week he's pointing out every incompletion, and the next week he's talking about the system fitting and the weapons being in place. There was no transition. There was no acknowledgement of the previous position. There was just a pivot, complete and total, as if the prior analysis had been from a different person entirely. That's not how fair analysts operate. Fair analysts evolve over time as new information becomes available. They revise their positions based on performance. They adjust their frameworks as they learn more about a situation, but they do it gradually. They explain their reasoning. They show their work. They acknowledge the previous position and explain why they're moving away from it. What Chase Daniel did was none of those things. It was a sudden, complete reversal that coincided perfectly with the moment when staying negative became untenable. And the people who never wavered, the ones who watched the film honestly and backed Shedeur from day one, they were proven right by the performance, not by Chase Daniel's opinion shift. They don't owe him anything for finally catching up. They don't need his validation. They can look back at the film and know that their original analysis was correct. And they can look at Chase Daniel's flip and understand exactly what it was. Survival instinct disguised as analysis. But there's something bigger happening here than just one analyst being caught on the wrong side of a story. There's a larger context that makes this moment matter in ways that go beyond Chase Daniel's credibility or Sheddeur Sanders' vindication. There's an organizational history that's so profound, so crushing, so completely relevant to what happens next, that it deserves to be understood in full. The Cleveland Browns have started 42 different quarterbacks since the franchise returned to the city in 1999. 42. Let that number sit for a moment because it's not just a statistic. It's not just a fun fact to throw around at parties. It's not something you mention casually and move on. It's a catastrophe. It's an organizational failure so profound that it explains everything about why this fanbase has learned to approach every season with dread before it even begins. It's why hope has been trained out of them. It's why faith has been replaced with skepticism. Think about what 42 different starting quarterbacks actually means. It means that in roughly 25 years, the organization has failed to find stability at the single most important position in football. Not once, not twice, but 42 times. 42 different guys, 42 different failed experiments, 42 different fresh starts that didn't work out. It means they've cycled through bodies at a rate that suggests either a complete inability to evaluate talent or a complete inability to develop it. Probably both. It means the organization has been unable to commit to a direction. They've been unable to build around a quarterback. They've been unable to create an environment where success is possible at that position. It means that fans in Cleveland have been forced to reset their expectations and their hope and their faith every single offseason for nearly 3 decades. Some of those 42 were veterans who were supposed to be established answers. Hall of Famers in some cases, or at least players with proven track records in the league. And they came to Cleveland and failed. The environment broke them down. The coaching situation shifted. The system changed. Something about the organization made it impossible for even veteran quarterbacks to succeed. So after a year or two, they moved on to the next option. Some were backups pressed into service because injuries or incompetence left no other option. These guys never had a chance from the beginning. They were thrown into situations with no preparation, no real support, no real belief that they were the long-term answer. They were emergency plugs in a dike that had too many holes. Of course they failed, but they still count as one of the 42. Some were expensive experiments that looked good on paper but fell apart when the games started mattering. Guys drafted high or signed to massive contracts based on potential or track record, but who never quite fit into what Cleveland was trying to do, or who got broken by the instability, or who simply weren't as good as their pedigree suggested. The investment didn't pan out, and within a couple of seasons, they were gone. Some lasted 1 game, some lasted half a season. Some lasted 3 or 4 years before the organization finally decided they weren't the answer and moved on. But regardless of how long they lasted, they all failed in the same fundamental way. They couldn't bring stability to the position. They couldn't serve as a foundation that the organization could build around. They couldn't be the answer that the Browns desperately needed. And every single time, the script was remarkably similar. There would be optimism in the offseason. This is the guy. This is the answer. This is the quarterback who's going to turn things around. Then the season would start and the reality would set in. The performance wouldn't match the expectation. The fit wouldn't work. The system wouldn't develop the way it was supposed to. And by the time the season ended, the conversation had shifted to, well, that didn't work out, let's look at what's available next year. The fans held on, and then they didn't. The coaches changed, and then they changed again. The offensive systems evolved, and the quarterback problems stayed exactly the same. It became almost pathological. The organization developed a disease at the quarterback position, and 42 different treatments didn't cure it. 42 different guys, 42 different hopes, 42 different disappointments. That history is the entire reason why what happens next with Sheddeur Sanders matters so much more than people are giving it credit for. This isn't just about whether Shedeur has the talent to be an NFL starter. That question has already been answered in the affirmative. He's been evaluated by the entire NFL. He's been drafted by a professional organization. His performance in preseason and limited game action has been encouraging. He's shown the tools. He's shown the intelligence. He's shown the ability to process information and make decisions at this level. That part is settled. The real question is whether the Browns organization is finally ready to commit. Are they ready to stop cycling through quarterbacks and actually build around one? Are they ready to give a young player the time and resources and clarity and faith that development requires? Are they ready to break the cycle? Because if they're not, if they fall back into old patterns, if they keep hedging their bets and looking over their shoulder for the next option, then Sheddeur Sanders will join the list. He'll become number 43, and the cycle will continue exactly like it always has. And the fans will reset their expectations again. And the organization will be back in the same place, searching for the next answer, the next solution, the next hope that will inevitably disappoint them. That's what's actually at stake here. That's what really matters. It's not about Chase Daniel's redemption or his apology or his recent shift in perspective. It's about an organization finally having a genuine chance to break a nearly 3-decade pattern of failure, and the only thing standing in the way is their own indecision. This brings us to a specific decision that the Browns organization needs to make, and it's one that Chase Daniel actually got right in his recent commentary. Even if he arrived at the correct conclusion through the back door of opportunism rather than through careful analysis from the beginning. The Browns should name Sheddeur Sanders the starter, not as a guarantee that he'll play every snap of the entire season, not as an excuse to ignore the other quarterbacks on the roster, not as a permanent, irrevocable declaration that can never be changed, but as a clear, unambiguous organizational commitment that says to the football world, this is our guy, we believe in him, we're building around him. That decision matters more than people are giving it credit for. It matters more than the typical offseason QB debate because it goes to the heart of how organizations develop young talent, how they signal their intentions to the locker room, and how they create the conditions necessary for success. Here's why that matters. Open competitions, the way they're typically run in the NFL, don't actually benefit young quarterbacks. They create divided attention. Coaches have to game plan for multiple scenarios. The offense isn't built consistently because nobody knows who's going to be throwing the ball week to week. Maybe Shedeur starts this week, but if he struggles, then it's the backup's turn next week. Maybe the backup plays well, and now you've got a controversy. Maybe Shedeur goes in and out of the rotation, and he never gets a chance to develop rhythm. The receiver group doesn't know if they're practicing against the guy who will actually play. They can't build chemistry with one quarterback because they might be catching passes from 2 or 3 different guys. The offensive line can't develop its understanding of one quarterback's tendencies because they're protecting different people. The defense doesn't know who they're preparing for. It's a mess of mixed signals and unclear expectations. More importantly, for a young quarterback specifically, an open competition creates doubt. It says, we're not sure about you, we're keeping our options open. You're competing for the job, you need to prove yourself before we commit. That might sound reasonable on paper. That might sound like good management, keeping multiple options alive, maintaining flexibility, not letting a young player get comfortable. But in practice, it's poison for development. It's the exact opposite of what young quarterbacks need to actually improve and figure out how to play at this level. A young quarterback needs clarity. He needs to know that he's the guy. He needs to walk into that building every single day understanding that the organization is behind him, the coaching staff is building around his strengths, and the job is his to own. He needs to understand that his job isn't to keep his job. His job is to win games. He doesn't need the pressure of competing for a starting position while simultaneously trying to learn a complex offense and develop chemistry with receivers and understand the nuances of NFL defenses. That's how you get the best version of a young quarterback. You give him the keys and you let him drive. You put him in a position where he can take ownership of the offense, where he can learn the system deeply over a full season, where he can develop chemistry with his receivers through thousands of reps, where he can understand his role in the team's success without constantly worrying about whether he's going to lose his job if he has a bad game. The open competition sounds fair on paper. It sounds like good management. It sounds like the organization is being responsible by maintaining flexibility and not committing too early to a quarterback who might not work out. But what it actually does is undermine the quarterback's development. It creates a situation where he's playing scared rather than playing free. It creates a situation where receivers are uncertain. It creates a situation where coaches are hedging their bets instead of fully committing to a system built around one quarterback's strengths. The Browns have wasted enough time playing this game. They've had 42 different quarterbacks because they've never committed to developing one. They've had 42 different guys because the organization has always kept one eye on the next option, always wondered if there was someone better available, always approached the quarterback position with the kind of caution that kills development rather than the kind of faith that enables it. Part of that is understandable. Committing to a quarterback is scary. If you name someone the starter and they fail, then you've invested a year in a direction that doesn't work out. You've potentially delayed seeking other options. You've committed resources to developing a guy who doesn't develop. That's a real risk. That's a legitimate concern. That's why organizations hedge their bets. But the cost of hedging your bets is that you never actually develop anyone. The cost is 42 different quarterbacks. The cost is 25 years of instability. The cost is a fan base that's trained to expect failure before the season even starts. The cost is an organization that's incapable of sustained success at the most important position in football. Sheddeur Sanders is the most compelling quarterback prospect this franchise has had in years. That's not an exaggeration. That's not hype. That's a product of his tools, his intelligence, the offensive system built around him, and the coaching staff that understands how to maximize those pieces. He has the ingredients to succeed in Cleveland. And the worst thing the Browns could do right now is muddy that clarity with a performative open competition that helps nobody and confuses everyone. Name him the starter. Build the offense around his strengths. Let Todd Monken do what he was brought there to do. Give the receivers consistency. Give the defense something clear to prepare for. Give Shedeur the environment where development is actually possible. Because if the Browns get this wrong, if they fall back into old patterns, if they keep hedging their bets and looking over their shoulder for the next option, then Sheddeur Sanders will join the list. And the cycle will continue exactly like it always has. And 42 will become 43. So where does that leave us with Chase Daniel? Honestly, it leaves us exactly where we started. He spent years doubting Sheddeur Sanders. He built a case against him when he should have been analyzing objectively. He created doubt when he could have created understanding. He used his platform to prosecute rather than to educate. And then, when the narrative shifted, when it became clear that he was on the wrong side of a story that's about to be defined by a young quarterback's potential, he apologized. The timing is telling. The reversal is stark. The fact that it happened the exact moment the public mood shifted proves everything about what was really going on. It wasn't about growth. It wasn't about humility. It was about relevance and survival. It was about understanding that if Chase Daniel stayed negative while the rest of the football world was recognizing Sheddeur's talent, he would isolate himself. He would look ridiculous. He would be the guy defending a position that the evidence no longer supported. So he jumped first. He pivoted. He became the guy who always believed, when really he was just the guy who realized the smart business move was to switch sides. And the worst part is that because he has a platform, because he has credibility, because people listen to him, his reversal carries a kind of weight that makes it seem like vindication. Like an authority figure finally admitting what we all knew. But that's not what this is. This is one voice among millions finally acknowledging what honest observers already knew. And the people who never wavered on Shedeur, the ones who watched the film honestly and believed in what they saw from day one, they don't owe Chase Daniel anything. Not a validation. Not a second look, not a single moment of credit for finally arriving at the obvious. They were right when it wasn't popular. They trusted the film when the consensus was doubt. They saw the potential when experts were pointing out limitations. They didn't need Chase Daniel to give them permission to believe. Sheddeur Sanders did not need Chase Daniel's belief in January when he was being criticized. He did not need it in February or March when the doubts were being amplified. He does not need it now when everyone can see that he's legitimate. The validation that actually matters is the one that comes from the field, from the performances, from the results. From the moments where under pressure, against NFL defenses in games that matter, he shows the intelligence and the poise and the decision-making that it takes to be great at this position. Everything else is just noise. Chase Daniel's apology is noise. It's not a revelation. It's not a turning point. It's just one voice among millions finally acknowledging what honest observers already knew. The throne was always Shedeur's. The foundation was always there. The potential was always real. Chase Daniel just had to wait until it became impossible to deny before he could bring himself to say so. What's particularly revealing about this whole situation is what it says about the nature of media narratives in professional sports. It says that narratives aren't built on objective analysis. They're built on momentum. They're built on which way the crowd is moving. They're built on what's popular to say at any given moment. And they shift the moment the crowd shifts. Chase Daniel's analysis didn't change because new information came out. His analysis didn't change because he did deeper research. His analysis changed because the room changed. And he's not unique in that. He's just one example among thousands of analysts and commentators and experts who adjust their positions based on momentum rather than based on evidence. The tragic irony is that if everyone approached analysis the way Chase Daniel did, with a predetermined conclusion and the willingness to cherry-pick evidence to support it, then nobody would ever get anything right. Nobody would ever actually understand what's happening in football. Nobody would ever make informed decisions about players and teams and systems. The game would just be a series of narratives being constructed and deconstructed based on whatever performed well that weekend. And maybe that's actually how it works sometimes. Maybe narratives do matter more than analysis. Maybe the story that gets told is more important than the truth of what actually happened. Maybe Chase Daniel understood this better than the people who were trying to analyze objectively. Maybe by understanding which way the wind was blowing, by being flexible with his positions, by adjusting when the momentum shifted, he was actually being smarter than the analysts who stuck to their guns based on evidence. But that's a depressing thought. That's a depressing reality if it's true. That would mean that integrity doesn't matter. That consistency doesn't matter. That actual understanding doesn't matter. That all that matters is reading the room and saying what's popular. The only thing that actually matters now is what the Browns organization does with this moment. Will they commit fully to Shedeur's development, or will they hedge their bets one more time? Will they name him the starter and build around him, or will they create division with an unnecessary competition? Will they finally break the cycle of 42, or will they add one more name to the list? That's the story that's actually worth paying attention to. That's the decision that will define the next chapter of this franchise. That's what we should all be focused on, because compared to an organization's ability to finally commit to a young quarterback, one analyst's apology is basically irrelevant. The tape doesn't care about Chase Daniel's opinion. The field doesn't care about his redemption. And Sheddeur Sanders certainly doesn't need his validation to succeed. The only thing that matters now is what comes next.